Hey girls, thought I would move a bit of furniture first up. Before I started talking about the Russia in the state, keep that light away. Russia in 1905 and the revolution that we just looked at and we just talked about remotely. So like we said earlier, Russia's a bit of a mad country. It's massive. Lots of different people, lots of different languages, lots of different cultures, lots of different faiths. And one thing that unites it is the Tsar and the Tsarina, or the Tsar, as the king, as the ruler. So he unites the country, and ironically, is perceived sometimes not to have really cared about his country. That might be bad propaganda, or not paying enough attention to his audience. But I think the Tsar, and maybe has been sometimes misrepresented. But the Tsar, and it's Nicholas and his wife Alexandra, who, and we'll come back to this later, happens to be German, doesn't help her. Nicholas is primarily the architect of the downfall of the Russian system, which has been in place for a good few hundred years. And of course, like France, absolute autocratic power. And a country, like we've said before, Russia hadn't had an industrial revolution, it hadn't had a modernization process. So whereas France had a significant bourgeoisie, Russia didn't. Russia has pretty much Tsar, the immediate nobility and the rich families. And after that, Russia has its landowning classes, but doesn't have an industrial class. It doesn't have people that are entrepreneurs or workers. And below, we've got the church, obviously, and the clergy, but below is the peasants and the serfs. And the serfs, of course, they're literally slaves. They're owned by the nobles and the landowners. And remember, we've seen that cartoon where when nobles would gamble and use serfs like chips in a poker game. And they didn't actually use serfs like chips in a poker game, but the fact was that a cartoonist could joke about human life being gambled away. And I think it resonates and rings true that the perception in the late 1800s about serfs and about Russian nobles was very, very true. So come 1905, when Russia or the Tsar is faced with a kind of a mini revolution, it heralds the revolution that's to come, and it's a warning shot to the Tsar that perhaps he doesn't really take seriously enough. A failed foreign war, in this case it's a war against Japan, when the Russians lose in humiliating, embarrassing circumstances. Remember, I've said that sometimes some people in Russia look to the east, which is Japan and China, to follow their ways, and some people in Russia felt it was more natural to look to the west and follow the ways of Europe. And largely it was the Tsar that looked to the west, and I've said before that a lot of Russians spoke French because they thought the language is far prettier than their own language, which is a bit of a damning indictment of your own country and your own culture, and doesn't make for kind of bonding or national unity and togetherness. But it's really difficult in a country that is as big as Russia to have that togetherness. And please Google, image search the different groups of people that are technically Russians, and you've got people that look proper Asian in their features, and you've got people that on the other side of Russia that look proper Scandinavian in their features. So you've got the blonde hair, the blue eyes, and all of that, and then on the other side, very, very different. So by 1905, Russia has acquired a lot of debt, a lot of spending. They fought a war which was just an absolute basket case of a disaster, and made the Tsar look like a complete and utter muppet. So he's now faced with this revolution / protest, which is led by a member of the clergy, a priest, Father Georgy Gapon. And Father Gapon's rebellion is maybe not even a rebellion, it's maybe just a visit to go and see the Tsar at his palace. He's not there anyway. To say, look mate, we know you're doing it tough at the moment, but these 20,000 people behind me and the 20 million people behind them are doing it super tough. They've got it really difficult. They're facing famine, they're facing shortages of food, they're facing cold, and they're facing a lack of firewood or coal, so they can't heat their houses and they can't feed themselves. And much as we love you, Tsar, and they called him Papa, and that was a tradition of Russia, that they held him in such high esteem, like he was their father. Much as we love you, this can't continue. And unfortunately, Father Georgy Gapon's protest was met with a hail of bullets and gunfire from the Tsar's personal bodyguard and the secret police. It was put down with absolute brutality in a way that sometimes is effective, and it sometimes makes the protesters simply go away. They're too scared. But in this case, they didn't go away. The protests in 1905 continue until at the end of 1905, and we'll do that next week in our live lessons. The Tsar comes up with a chief minister, a guy called Sergei Witta. Sergei Witta comes up with this idea of an October Manifesto. So from protests from January through to September, eventually the Tsar goes, okay, we've got to make some changes, or Witta says we've got to make some changes. And this October Manifesto is a plan for Russia to go forward, so the Tsar can still be the leader of Russia, but you'll have some constitutional changes, some reforms and freedoms, and a lightening of that state of terror. Whether the Tsar ever intended to keep the promises of that constitution, the October Manifesto, or whether he just thought, you know, this is a band-aid, it's a quick fix solution, it'll get the people off my back at the moment, and then once they're off my back, I'll be an absolute brutal dictator again. I don't know, and I've studied this extensively, and I've enjoyed the topic, and I think it's a really interesting topic, but I still don't know whether Witta, when he designed the October Manifesto for the Tsar, whether he designed it to actually make a difference, or whether he designed it so the Tsar could simply say, do you know what, kids, this will do for a little while, and then they'll go away and they'll forget about things, and I'll be able to reassert my power once again. But they didn't really go away. The problems continued to mount up, and then by 1914, when Russia starts to enter World War I, the stage is set for an absolute disaster. Though if the Japan War of 1905 was a disaster, then the First World War from 1914 to the 1917 Revolution was an unmitigated and catastrophic disaster that Russia was clearly not equipped for, in a way that nobody could have seen, or nobody could have foreseen, I suppose. So that's where we go to next week. So the bit from the October Manifesto through to the effects of World War I, which are devastating on the Russian economy, the Russian mentality or their psyche. All those things are devastating for the Russians in the 1914 to 17 war, and lead directly to the fall of the Tsar. Girls, gotta go now because my Year 9 lesson's starting. I hope that as an overview of the problems leading to 1905 and the problems that are still there at the start of World War I, and this catastrophe that the Tsarist system has made and led to, and the problems that have not been addressed are the result. I've not even talked about Rasputin and his long beard, but you've seen the video, and that is just another mess which is out of all control. So yeah, watch that video and add Rasputin into what I've just been talking about now, and you've got a country that's lost the plot. See ya, bye.